Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Some of you might be in classes already, or some of you might still be in break, but I think it's important to figure out how you learn best. By the time this video is published, I would have started my third year in college as a non-major. It's pretty complicated about what a non-major is, so I'll just explain it in the future. Anyway, I'll be talking about different study methods, some pros and cons of the ones I've tried before, and how I study now. I'll leave timestamps in the description if you want to skip to a particular part. So, let's get into it. There's a bunch of different theories of learning styles, and I've seen some studies that say they don't really matter. But my suggestion is to not limit yourself by boxing yourself into a specific style, but just take your time to try different methods, see what works for you, and maybe modify some things to suit your needs. I figured out my study style by looking around at what people are doing, trying it out, then seeing which parts are helpful and which aren't. So I hope this can help you figure out your own method. First style is flashcards. They're the most classic way of reviewing. You write a question on the front and an answer on the back, then just go through them. You can use index cards, write them on there, an app on your phone, or a website. I personally use Quizlet, not sponsored, for a majority of them, so I can type them out and have it also accessible on my phone. It's one of the most flexible types of review methods because you can be as specific or as general as you want. It's more for recall than understanding, but that depends on the subject you're studying. If you're going for paper flashcards, it might be difficult to keep them all together, and having one question per card would waste a lot of paper, especially when you're only going to use the cards once. So that's why I use index cards more for formula cards rather than question flashcards. It also takes some time investment to get the individual cards, so you can't start studying right away, and it isn't a thing you can just cram into the night before a test. If you like seeing everything laid out, then making graphic organizers, flowcharts, and lists might be better for you. It might help with timelines and processes. I've used it before to memorize how to solve stuff for math tests. It's a lot easier and less time-consuming than making individual flashcards, but these types of organizers can only be used on certain types of information. If the information is presented in a more jumbled way, it's hard to look for connections between items, and it might take longer than just trying to learn the information as it is. When it comes to studying, some people find it better when they have people to study around. It also allows people to ask help for topics they can't exactly grasp yet, and helping with answering essay questions. A study in applied cognitive psychology shows that when you learn something to teach someone else, it's more effective because you try to simplify the idea that someone else could understand it. I used this technique in one of my hardest subjects yet, senior high philosophy. I do my review the night before, which we'll see later, then use the time before the test discussing and clarifying concepts with my classmates. As you can see, it's a very essay-heavy class for my quizzes. I'm not personally fond of study groups as a main form of review. It's good for right before a test, but as a talkative person, I find that it distracts me having people around that I can talk to. This is probably the most time-consuming methods on the list, but I've known this to work for some people and for me in specific classes. There are some people who just tend to remember things more when they write it down. Rewriting can be for aesthetics or just for putting things together. When rewriting, you usually take short snippets of the original, try to remember them, and write them down instead of going word per word, which for me helps more on recall. This method can also be helpful if the lectures you have are more jumbled and the class goes on tangents that are still relevant to the class. This is the method I did for my French class, where we had a book, but the instructor also added lessons that weren't in the book and random words that we wanted to learn. Like I said, this is the most time-consuming method, so if you are going to try this, I suggest trying it on one subject first so you don't have to invest so much time into it when you're just trying it out. I wouldn't really consider this a review for an exam type of thing because it just takes so long, but sometimes rewriting your notes allows you to get the information in your brain right after the lecture. This would be a good method for classes where you're expected to read before the class or a PowerPoint is given ahead of the lecture. When the instructor expects students to give many of their own inputs in the class, it helps to have your own notes instead of just your memory to rely on. This method for me promotes more learning when dealing with readings because I can't just skip over some points. It pushes me to read it again until I can summarize it enough to put it into notes. When the instructor has extra detail about the topic during the actual lecture, I can just write it on a sticky note and attach it with my existing notes. I tried this with my psychology and anthropology class, and it took me longer to work because I had to go through the readings, highlight them, then still have to write them down. It was easier for me though to locate topics we're discussing than having to flip through a 20 to 30 page reading and expect to be quick enough to get enough participation points. When you try to retrieve information from your brain and you're just having a hard time, your brain doesn't stop looking for the information. Just like how people get good ideas in the shower, try to relax and focus on something else like a fidget toy or walking around. If you're the type who learns by physically doing the actions or has a tendency to multitask, maybe you can try this method. In my experience, pacing while reviewing helps me relieve some of my stress before the exam, and fidgeting with something reminds me of random bursts of information while I'm writing. For certain people, playing with something can be more distracting than helpful. It can also serve as a distraction for others if you're around them. So this isn't really for everyone. When dealing with a hands-on subject like math, physics, or programming, there aren't many ways you can work on them except practice. This can be also a good method for finals and other comprehensive exams. Just take the questions, cover your answers, and answer them again. You can just use your previous tests as an answer key. You can even ask for old tests from other people who took the class before you for more practice material. Questions in the actual test are usually similar to the ones they give you on homeworks and lecture examples, so it's worth doing them again. When you get your test papers back, use that time to ask your instructors what the correct answers were and how you could have done things better, and make sure to write them down somewhere. Problems can arise when you get stuck trying to answer certain questions and don't have the means to get the right answers. This really limits you because there are very few alternatives to learning math, physics, and these types of subjects. Now on to how I study. My method of studying is a combination of many techniques. The techniques I've talked about are methods I've seen other people doing. I tried them and mashed them together to make one that does what I needed to do. I only made this when I really tried figuring out how I can study better during my second year of college. The reason why would take another video. For a year now, all of my subjects have been more on the information recall side than on the application side. I haven't taken math or physics during that time, so I haven't made a more polished system for those. All of the ones I've taken in the past year are social science, literature, and language subjects. I start with my readings. If it's something like a textbook, I prefer taking notes on that and writing it separately so I can be prepared for a class discussion. I use different highlighters with a lot of ink so I can label parts of the reading for easy note-taking later. During the lecture, if there's stuff I missed, I just put it on a sticky note, which is really helpful for when the instructor forgets something, then goes back to the topic on tangents. At least a day before the exam, I make sure I already have my reviewer on Quizlet. I spend some of my free time making it so I wouldn't have to worry about it later on. I try to go through the entire set on learn mode at least once, twice if I can. If the first round of my review reaches 1 a.m., then I stop when I get through the whole thing. Sleep is also really important, so I do my best to finish all I have to do before 1 a.m. I put a star on certain cards that I'm planning to review some more the next day. While I'm typing out or going through my Quizlet, I prefer listening to music with lyrics. Usually, it's my musicals playlist. If you guys want to see it, I leave the links in the description. I know it's not recommended for productivity, but I realize that songs tend to get stuck in my head really quickly, and that can help me retrieve information because I'll end up humming the songs while answering anyway. During my morning commute, I go through the cards that I set aside so I can make sure to memorize them for enumeration questions and go over the topics that I'm still having a hard time with. If I have friends in the class, I try to discuss with them before the test starts on the chance I might have missed something. Right before the test, I just take a deep breath, trust I did everything in my power to prepare, and commit that I'll do my best no matter what questions await me. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and that it gave you some new ideas to try this semester. If you like this video and want to see more content from me, then hit the subscribe button and the bell to know when a new video is out. Tell me how you study in the comments. I guess that's all for this video. Bye guys!